Hold up, since this is an Exorcist video, let me see if I can do the Exorcist walk real quick. Oh, I got it. Let's see. I can't do it. Oh god. Oh god. Okay. Yep. All right. Yeah. Don't do that. I should have known better. I'm already kind of broken, so that hurt. That kind of hurt. Okay. Howdy everybody, and welcome back to the Willie Say Willie channel once again, and today I'm doing something that I haven't done in a hot minute, which would be an iceberg chart. Now if you're unfamiliar with what an iceberg chart is, well, then I welcome you to the internet in the year 2023, as I can see this is clearly your first time. But it's essentially a chart that covers a wide variety of topics that ranges from conspiracy theories to movies. It can literally be a chart about anything, but basically it starts at the tippy top of what is the most widely known and commonly recognized about whatever the topic is, down to the depths and the bottom of the chart to what is the least well known or the most obscure about that said topic. Now originally I was going to do a chart about the paranormal activity movies, but I can always save that for later. I just figured since the new Exorcist movie is out, it'd be more fun to do it on that. By the way, do not go see the new Exorcist movie. It's hella mid, as the kids say. And plus, I was just itching to talk about one of the most influential and groundbreaking horror movies of all time, The Exorcist. Now, upon doing the research for this chart, I was actually kind of surprised at how many mainline Exorcist movies there are. I mean, like, okay, I know there's plenty of ripoffs and copycat movies of it, but I just mean the amount of movies that actually pertain to the original story. I believe there's like 5 in total, but yeah, there was a lot of information that surprised me when I found it out. Now, if you haven't seen any of the original Exorcist movies, then I highly recommend you go out and watch at least the first one, as it's a classic and I think it's a great movie. Exorcist 3 is also really good, but many of the sequels are of varying quality. I'm looking at you, Exorcist 2. But if you have seen them, well then, I mean, you and me, we're like this. We're tight. We're cool, okay? So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off at tier 1, we have, well, The Exorcist. And The Exorcist is a 1973 movie adapted from the book by William Peter Blatty of the same name. The movie is regarded as a horror classic and has been loved by many people throughout many generations, and even was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, of which it won 2 of them, so for a horror movie that's very impressive. Now even people who haven't seen the movie are still pretty familiar with the plot, and basically it follows the story of a girl named Reagan McNeil who becomes possessed by a demon, and it just showcases the stress and horrors that puts on her family, herself, and her others around her. And obviously there is an exorcism involved with priest. That's kind of a given. Now what many people don't know is that the original book was actually inspired by a real life event, and basically William Peter Blatty saw a news article discussing the possession of a 14-year-old boy in Mount Rainier, Maryland, and it discussed the story of this boy not being able to be cured by conventional medicine and having violent outbursts and foul language before being, treated by a priest. However, it turns out that the original news article that Blatty supposedly saw wasn't actually a real story or verifiable. It actually was based off the story of another boy who was being possessed in Cottage City, Maryland, going under the name Roland Doe, who I will talk about in another entry. Moving on to the next entry, we have The Exorcist 2, The Heretic, and as I mentioned before, this movie is not very good. Actually, no, it's more than that. It's really weird. But basically, The Exorcist 2 came out in 1977 and was supposed to be a direct sequel to the original Exorcist, with Linda Blair even reprising her role as Reagan McNeil, and also Darth Vader was in it, just if you wanted to know. Now, the events of the film are considered to be non-canon, as the original author, William Peter Blatty, had nothing to do with the making of this movie, and The Exorcist 3 is seen as the true sequel. But yeah, it's probably for the best, because it's just not good. The movie just really is not good. I don't watch it. You'll be wasting your time. Next up, we have The Exorcist 3, which is the true sequel to the original Exorcist movie, and it was written and directed by original author William Peter Blatty in 1990. And just like the first Exorcist movie, The Exorcist 3 is actually based off a book called Legion. However, the studio wanted to change the name of it to, capitalize on The Exorcist popularity, so they didn't want the name Legion being on, the poster and title of the movie. The story takes place 15 years after the events of the first movie and focuses on a character that we didn't really get much screen time with in the previous movie, Lieutenant William Kinderman. Now, The Exorcist 3 is more of a thriller murder mystery rather than just a straight up horror movie like the original Exorcist, and follows a kind of whodunit story with Lieutenant Kinderman trying to piece together a series of killings that are very similar to a previous serial killer's killings named the Gemini Killer. And I don't want to spoil too much of it. I think The Exorcist 3 is definitely worth a watch, but I'll talk about more of the plot later on. The next entry is Dominion, which is a 2005 supernatural horror film and serves as a prequel to the original Exorcist movie. The story follows a young Father Merrin, who was the original, old priest in the first Exorcist movie. And this is actually one that I haven't actually seen, so I only know what I've read about this movie. I heard it's not that bad from what I've heard, but I think Bill Skarsgård is in it, so I mean, maybe if you're a fan of him, you want to watch it, but yeah. Next we have Exorcist the Beginning, and this is yet another prequel to The Exorcist that actually came out before Dominion. And basically this movie was created as a kind of more classic horror movie out of fear that Dominion wouldn't do that well commercially and critically. So they kind of just followed a generic horror movie formula with this one. And apparently both of these movies use many of the same sets and locations and essentially follow the same plot as each other. So they're kind of just different mirror versions of each other, apparently. Exorcist the Beginning received a 11% of Rotten Tomatoes versus Dominion's 30%, so I guess Dominion was a little better. The funniest part about Exorcist the Beginning to me is a quote from William Peter Blatty himself in an interview, which he said, after a slam-bang opening sequence, Harlan's prequel deteriorated into what was surely the most humiliating professional experience of my life, particularly the finale. I think that's just a fancy way of saying your movie sucked, dude. Next up, we have The Exorcist Believer, which is the newest installment of the Exorcist franchise and was actually originally planned on being a trilogy. Now, I just recently saw this movie in theater, so I can speak on it. But on that trilogy note, I don't think it's going to happen. I highly doubt it will, because this movie was not that good. It's not like the worst movie I've ever seen in my life, but it was just, I don't know, man. It felt like it just didn't really know what The Exorcist was even supposed to be about. It just knew that, oh, a girl gets possessed in the movie, so I'm just gonna make another generic demonic possession movie and have it be 2 girls instead of just 1. But I don't know. If you liked the movie and saw it and thought it was good, then kudos to you, man. I'm glad you enjoyed it, but I just didn't. Next entry, we have Reagan McNeil, full name being Reagan Teresa McNeil, who is the titular character in the Exorcist book and movie. Reagan's character is a shy, creative young girl who becomes possessed by the demon Pazuzu and is basically a horror and cultural icon. I'm sure you've seen this face a bunch of times from when she's possessed or in the Scary Maze game. You've probably seen it a lot. The character of Reagan McNeil and her demonic possession has been referenced and spoofed many, many times throughout the years and TV series and movies and beyond. Sometimes even being portrayed in parodies by Linda Blair herself, the actress who played her. And I can talk more about that later. Next up, we have Father Damien Karras, who was one of the main characters in the original Exorcist books and movies and its follow-up, Legion or The Exorcist 3, and is famously portrayed by Jason Miller. Father Karras is a troubled priest and psychiatric counselor suffering from a crisis of faith who confronts the demon Pazuzu alongside Father Merrin in the exorcism of Reagan. Okay, now spoiler alert for The Exorcist book and movie and Exorcist 3. But you might be asking yourself, Willie, how was he a character at all in The Exorcist 3? I thought he dies at the end of the first movie when he lets Pazuzu possess him and jumps out a window. Well, you would be correct, but in The Exorcist 3 and the book Legion, he's actually a minor character because Pazuzu helps the soul of the Gemini killer, the serial killer, possess his dead body, and he makes appearances, as Father Karras or the Gemini killer, but there you go. Now you know. Now you know. Howdy, for my next entry, I am wearing different clothes, so please ignore that. Check out the cool Scooby-Doo sweatshirt. It's pretty sick. Anyway, the next entry is the one and only Pazuzu, who is the main antagonist and demon of the Exorcist film series and books. Apparently, William Blatty was inspired by Assyrian and Babylonian mythology in creating the character, where Pazuzu was apparently the king of the demons of the wind, and he was the son of the god Hanbi. Now, we usually see Pazuzu in human form while he's trying to possess somebody, but his true form is depicted through statues, where apparently his true form is kind of a combination of a human and animal. And he basically has like the body of a man, like the head of a lion or a dog, and kind of eagle-like taloned feet and 2 pairs of wings and a scorpion's tail, and apparently a serpentine penis, apparently. I didn't notice that before, but yeah. Pazuzu also has a couple different nicknames, one of which is Captain Howdy that Reagan gave him, like as she was talking to a supposed imaginary friend, but it turns out it was just the demon Pazuzu. The next entry is the Exorcist novel, and as I mentioned before, yes, the Exorcist is based off a book written by William Peter Blatty in 1971. It went on to become a very successful 1973 film that was also written by Peter Blatty himself. The book details the possession of a 12-year-old girl named Reagan McNeil, as we all know, who was the daughter of a famous actress, and also details the efforts of a Jesuit priest and psychiatrist that attempts to exorcise the demon from her. The book was inspired by a supposed case of demonic possession in 1949 that William Blatty heard about while he was a student at Georgetown University in 1950. Speaking of exorcisms that inspired The Exorcist, the next entry is Roland Doe, which is the pseudonym given to a 14-year-old boy who was the alleged victim of demonic possession in the 1940s. The events of this demonic possession was recorded by attending priest Raymond J. Bishop, with many supernatural claims being attributed to this possession, like, levitating, speaking in Latin, like, the works. An interesting fact, in December 2021, the Skeptical Inquirer reported that the true identity of Roland Doe was Ronald Edwin Hunkler. The consensus of the report is basically that there was nothing supernatural about Robbie. He was just very deeply disturbed and just needed mental health treatment, with many of the supernatural elements being explained away. Like, for example, when he would supposedly speak Latin, he basically was just repeating phrases that the priest spoke. Things like that. But anyway, moving on. Next we have Mercedes McCambridge. If you don't recognize that name, I don't blame you. She is a very old actress, but she's most notable for performances in Radio, with Orson Welles calling her the world's greatest living radio actress. But for the sake of this iceberg chart, she's mostly known as providing the voice of the demon Pazuzu, and good job, Mrs. Cambridge. She did a very good job. The next entry is pretty straightforward, and that is just The Exorcist was the first horror film to be nominated for a Best Picture Oscar. And I mean, yeah, that's just 100% true. It was the first one to be nominated. And that just goes to show how much influence the Exorcist movie had on not only the genre of horror, but just movies in general. The Exorcist Steps, or the Georgetown Stairs, are a real flight of stairs that are at the end of M Street in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., and you probably recognize them from the scene at the end of The Exorcist where Father Karras, comes tumbling down them and dies. Spoiler alert, as I mentioned previously. But the funniest part of the story is that apparently when they were filming, they were padded with a half-inch thick rubber for the stuntman to fall down. And while they were filming that scene, there would be Georgetown University students who would gather around and watch the stunt from the rooftops. Apparently they were charged like $5 to be able to watch the stunt being filmed. So yeah, that would have been pretty fun to see, especially if you're like a college student around the area at the time. The next entry is Projectile Vomit, and I wasn't 100% sure what the creator of the chart meant by this entry, but I'm assuming they intended to talk about the little fun fact that the pea soup that was used as the projectile vomit in the scene of The Exorcist was actually supposed to hit Jason Miller, Father Karras, in his shirt, like in his chest, but they aimed it too high and it hit him right in the face. And they decided to just keep that in because they thought it seemed more dramatic. And the anger and frustration that Jason Miller shows in that scene, which is all genuine and real. And apparently that happened a lot in the filming of Exorcist. Not the vomit, but the fact that things would go slightly wrong and they would just keep it in the movie as like a genuine reaction for the the sake of the actor. The Exorcist TV series was a Fox television network show based off the Exorcist book, and it was created by Jeremy Slater in 2016. Now, I didn't watch this show, but I think it was pretty well received. I mean, they did receive a People's Choice Award for favorite new TV drama. However, the show was canceled after only 2 seasons, so it kind of just left on a cliffhanger, and some of the storylines were never resolved. But I believe you can still stream it and check it out if you wanted to. I'm not really sure what platforms they have it on. But yeah, interesting fact. I didn't know they had a Exorcist TV show until making this, video. Next up we have Legion, which is a 1983 horror novel that is a direct sequel to The Exorcist and is written by, once again, William Peter Blatty. The title is derived from the Bible, more specifically the Gospel of Luke, when Jesus encounters a man that is possessed by many demons, and Jesus asks him what is his name, and he responds with Legion, for many devils that enter him, or a variation being, oh, we are legion, for we are many, but you get the idea. And as I mentioned before, it was made into a movie in 1990 titled The Exorcist 3, and like I said before, the studio wanted to keep the Exorcist title because of name recognition rather than the book title, but the movie and book follow pretty much the same plot, with the character of Lieutenant Kinderman being the main focus, and it being more of a thriller / murder mystery whodunit story rather than just a straight up horror book. And as I mentioned previously in a spoiler alert type section, basically it's revealed that while Lieutenant Kinderman is investigating the series of killings that are very similar to the Gemini killer serial killings that happened many years previously, it's revealed that the demon Pazuzu was actually helping the soul of the Gemini killer enter the body of Father Karras from the first Exorcist movie in order to continue his spree of killings, and this was kind of as a way to get revenge on the events of the first book and movie, because Pazuzu was unable to possess Reagan, and Father Karras killed himself while Pazuzu was inside of him. But yeah, it was basically kind of an interesting twist, as who the hell was going to guess that? If you didn't know anything about the book or movie, how would you ever guess that when you first start reading it? Now, I'm not really doing it justice by just explaining it to you. I think The Exorcist 3 is a very underrated movie, so I highly recommend you go actually and watch it yourself. For this next part, I might be explaining too much of Exorcist lore, but I really want to add this in there because it just kind of deepens the Exorcist lore to me. But basically, at the end of the book and movie, Kinderman ends up concluding with himself, basically coming to the conclusion that he believes that this is all in the Exorcist universe and lore. This is all, canon. Basically, Lieutenant Kinderman believes that the Big Bang that created the universe was Lucifer falling from heaven, and that the entire universe, including humanity, are just broken parts of Lucifer, and that evolution itself is basically the process of Lucifer putting himself back together as an angel, which, that is just crazy in terms of the implication. That is insane, but it's just the fact that the Exorcist lore is way deeper than I imagined, because I didn't know that little snippet was in there. It had been a long time since I saw the Exorcist 3 movie, so I was like, what? That was in there? I don't remember that. But it's definitely in the book. I know that. I need to rewatch the movie, but still, it's just a crazy piece of Exorcist lore I just couldn't help to talk about. Next up, we have Father Linkster Marin, who is a priest and exorcist who had several encounters with the demon Pazuzu, and eventually kind of became the one it assumedly feared the most because of his multiple encounters with them, and alongside Father Karras attempted to exorcise the demon Pazuzu from the body of Reagan McNeil. He's kind of the iconic old wise priest stereotype, and even though he was just a supporting character in the original Exorcist film, he's probably one of the most recognizable characters because of the famous image of him standing under the lamppost. But even though he was only a minor character, sort of, in the first Exorcist movie, he's basically the main character with the two Exorcist prequels, Dominion and Exorcist the Beginning. It's a little fun fact I remember, but the actor who played Father Marin, Max von Sydow, was only 44 in the original Exorcist movie. So every day before they filmed, they had to apply all this latex and makeup and stretch his skin to make him look way older. I think he was supposed to be in his 70s or something like that, or 60s when, in terms of the character. But it's just funny to me how they, instead of casting an older actor, they just cast Max von Sydow, who did a great job. I just thought it was funny how they had to put all this makeup on him. And it's funny to me because when he has all the makeup and stuff on him, you can kind of see it more when you watch the movie. You can kind of see some of the lines don't look as convincing, at least to me. You can kind of tell, but still, I just thought that was funny. Next intro we have is Spinning Head, and this is obviously referring to the famous 360 and 180 head turns that Reagan does while she's possessed. And the funny thing how they achieved that effect was basically they had a life-size replica of Linda Blair's head and shoulders, and the replica was mounted on a rig, and it allowed itself to be rotated really quickly. And so like Linda Blair only had to like perform the facial expressions and like the upper body movements while, you know, laying down on a special effects bed. And basically like they would have like the rotating head would be superimposed like on her body in like post-production. So yeah, I don't know, just movie magic. It was really interesting, especially back then for the 70s. But yeah, speaking of movie magic, the next entry is the spider walk. And actually this scene was originally deleted from the initial film's release, and it wasn't restored until, you know, later on. But basically the director William Friedkin felt that the scene had like a big, it was too, you know, special effecty, like way too early on in the movie. It basically came off too strong too early on, so that's why he originally cut it out. But a lot of fans were happy to see it added back in later on, like re-releases and stuff. And yeah, looking back on it, it is kind of like, there's two versions of it I saw. There's a part where like, I've seen one where she comes down the stairs and just has blood in her mouth, but then there's also an extended one where she actually comes down the stairs and like flicks her tongue and stuff and like crawls towards her mom and everything. It's like, I don't know. I kind of understand why they took it out. I like it still, but it is like a little bit goofy, but I understand why the director wanted to take it out, like, honestly. Moving on to tier 2, we're starting off with The Conjuring 3 Exorcist reference, and pretty straightforward. I mean, basically The Conjuring 3 just recreated the Exorcist's, you know, lamppost scene that is probably the most famous image from the movie. And I mean, yeah, it's whatever. It's just an homage to it, you know, not that big a deal, but I've seen it 100 times, so. You know, I mentioned that there's different versions of The Exorcist before. Well, the next entry is The Exorcist Director's Cut, and basically this just adds an additional 10 minutes to the overall movie and has like updated CGI effects and extended conversations between Father Merrin and Father Karras, as well as an updated ending scene. And I mean, they're not bad additions, like it just adds a little bit more to it, but it's basically The Exorcist equivalent of George Lucas's re-releases of Star Wars, where he would add unnecessary CGI and sound dubbing. But anyway, moving on. Next up we have the Scary Maze game, which I'm sure you all are familiar with that, but basically it was a viral 2000s horror game prank that would have the player guiding a dot with their mouse through a series of 3 levels with different mazes, and you can't touch the sides of the walls. But when you get to the final and third maze, right before you get to the end with the red door, the game would basically cut to a very loud scream and a picture of Reagan while she's possessed from The Exorcist. So yeah, this game definitely got me when I was younger. I had people like older friends that would be like, yo, play this awesome game, man. And yeah, I was horrified. So I didn't do anything crazy like punch my computer screen, but I did scream and cry like a little girl. Next up we have Scary Movie 2, which is a 2001 supernatural horror parody directed by Keenan Ivory Wayans of the Wayans Brothers. And I'm sure many of you remember the Scary Movie franchise and a bunch of those parody spoof films. But in the second Scary Movie, basically the entire opening scene is exclusively a parody of The Exorcist. So yeah, I'm not surprised that this is on this iceberg, but I do remember Scary Movie 1 and 2 being the funniest ones. It's been a while since I've seen the other ones, but I remember kind of after 2 or 3, they just weren't even really worth watching, like, at all. But like I said, it's been a while since I've seen them, so. The next entry I'm surprised is even on here, but The Demon in the Mattress is the 4th episode of Courage of the Cowardly Dog, and is pretty much a parody of The Exorcist, with Muriel being possessed by an evil mattress, so it's pretty obvious where the inspiration came from. Speaking of Courage the Cowardly Dog, I really hope they do like a reboot of the show or something, even though the voice actress for Muriel has since passed away, RIP. I did love that show and like to see them do something more with that franchise, but then again, maybe it's better to let some things just stay the way they are. Treehouse of Horror 28. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what that is, the show The Simpsons does a series of horror or Halloween themed episodes in honor of Halloween during the October time frame, and Treehouse of Horror 28 is just a parody of The Exorcist for one of those episodes. Now, the episode follows a pretty straightforward possession plot, with Maggie, the baby, being the subject of the possession. But the most interesting thing about this episode is that the director William Friedkin of the original Exorcist movie was actually cast as Dr. Kenneth Humphreys in the 3rd segment of the episode, so yeah, that's pretty cool. Now we're on to tier 3, and you'll notice the further along down we go in this iceberg chart, the tiers have less and less entries in them. That's just the way the creator made it, I don't know why. But anyway, Pig squeals were a key part of the Exorcist sound design, and pretty straightforward. Basically, pig squeals were mixed and remixed together with the normal audio to basically give a sort of animalistic and uneasy sound with Reagan's like possessed moaning and grunting and exorcism. I think it worked very effectively because it like, you kind of like subconsciously kind of are repulsed by it. Now, The Exorcist might not have been the first movie to utilize pig squeals to enhance their audio, but I want to at least think that they definitely influenced it for later movies, so I'll just leave it at that. Next up, we have The Exorcist's most famous image was actually influenced by a series of Rene Magritte paintings. Now, at first glance, you probably won't be able to tell, but once you start comparing the works of Rene Magritte, especially in her series Empire of Lights, you'll start to see where the inspiration comes from the Exorcist poster. So yeah, just an interesting fact. I did not know that before, and I actually seen some of Rene's artwork before, just never pieced it together. I guess I'm not a detective, I guess. I just didn't point that out. Moving on to tier 4, we have Denise Nickerson was originally cast to play Reagan. And if you're not familiar with who that is, basically Denise originally played Violet Beauregard in the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory movie. And I would love to see a version of The Exorcist with her in it. That would be kind of, I think that'd be kind of funny. But basically her parents are the reason that Denise didn't play in the movie because they thought the material was just too disturbing. So Linda Blair ended up getting it. And we're all thankful for it. Linda did a great job even at such a young age. So kudos to her. Next up, we have Linda Blair injured her back. Now, this injury is pretty bad. Basically, Linda Blair developed a fracture in her spine while filming The Exorcist, and it later developed into scoliosis, and that obviously negatively impacted her health for many years. Basically, the scene, like the pinpoint scene where the fracture happened is when she was being thrashed around on her bed near the beginning of the movie. And basically, the machine that she was like attached to that was like thrashing around malfunctioned and really hurt her. So the screams you hear in that scene are her getting her back broken. Basically, it's not good. Moving on to tier 5, we have The Exorcist Curse. And okay, this one I want to just read off some of the events that supposedly happened surrounding the production and movie-going experience of The Exorcist because it kind of blew my mind. Now, you might not be aware of this, but when the first Exorcist movie came out, there was huge amounts of hysteria surrounding the movie-going experience of it, with many moviegoers saying they vomited or passed out, and in some cases even had a freaking heart attack, apparently. But what might be even less well known are the events surrounding the production of The Exorcist, and this I want to read this out because I don't want to miss anything, because this is it's nuts. The deaths of at least 4 people have been linked to the film, and some believe this is proof of the Exorcist curse. They included Jack McGowan, who played the eccentric film director Burke Dennings in the film and was killed by demon-played Reagan McNeil. His character was attacked by the possessed child who used her superhuman strength to break his neck and then flung him through the bedroom window. Ahead of the film's release, Jack tragically died from complications related to influenza, which he caught during the London flu epidemic in 1973. Vasiliki Malyaros, who played Father Damien Karras' mother, also passed away that same year before The Exorcist hit the big screen. The star, who had no previous acting experience and was cast after being spotted at a restaurant, was ruled to have died from natural causes at an inquest. In the film, Vasiliki's character died after being admitted to a hospital and later haunted the dreams of Father Karras. During the production, a number of the cast and crew, including Linda Blair, who played Reagan, Max von Sydow, who played Father Marin, also lost family members. Not only that, the son of Jason Miller, who played Father Karras, had a near-fatal motorcycle accident during filming. The Exorcist was faced with multiple production delays, but the most notable one happened early on into the production. The set for Reagan's family home burned down in 1972 after a bird flew into the circuit box. Eerily, the only part of the set that survived was the bedroom where the exorcisms would take place. Film historian Sarah Croth told iNews this set production backed significantly and led to a draining shooting period of over a year. After the incident, which caused a 6-week delay, real Jesuit priest Thomas M. King was called in to bless the set. Ellen Burstyn, who played concerned mom Chris McNeil, suffered a spinal injury while being hoisted around on a harness. She was left on crutches for the rest of the production and recalled the accident after a 2018 interview with The Guardian. The The Exorcist was released on Boxing Day in 1973, but it seemed the claims of the curse weren't going to die down. During one screening in Rome, it was reported that a bolt of lightning struck a church opposite the cinema. In America, one woman passed out and broke her jaw and later sued Warner Brothers for an undisclosed sum. Meanwhile, in the UK, it was reported that St. John's ambulance staff attended screenings to help distressed cinema goers. Claims about the Exorcist curse continued, and according to Miss Crowther, it was used as a marketing tool for the film. So yeah, basically the production of The Exorcist was just a complete mess and disaster, and even the movie-going experience wasn't safe, as just people were just freaked out and had mass hysteria over the movie. So yeah, with all that being said, do I believe in the Exorcist curse? Not really, but it's entertaining. It definitely is very crazy to be involved in the production and movie going experience like that. And I thought seeing Endgame when it came out would be insane, but nothing beats The Exorcist, I guess. And speaking of hysteria surrounding the release of The Exorcist, the next entry are barf bags, and apparently Exorcist themed barf bags were given out at some theaters that were showing the movie. I don't have any stats or anything about who all actually puked seeing The Exorcist, but I'm sure a few people did, and they just used that as a marketing ploy for the movie. So yeah, pretty funny looking back on it. Starting off with tier 6, we have The Exorcist's R rating, and the article I'm about to read to you was written by the New York Times on February 3rd, 1974, about the controversial R rating given to The Exorcist. Within hours after The Exorcist opened in Washington on December 26, business employees at Metro Media watched as a girl was removed from a showing at the cinema theater and placed in an ambulance. That night, a young editor returned from the theater, which is across the street from our offices, with a report of people gagging and becoming sick. The police warned that if tickets were sold to minors, arrest would be made. What? Responding to various pressures, Jack Valenti, the man generally regarded as having fathered the rating system when he left the White House staff in 1967 to become president of the Motion Picture Association of America, spoke with the members of his review board by telephone on New Year's Eve. Any claim made by board members that they had not recognized the possibility of the film's harmful effect on children back in October when the rating was made no longer had validity. Yet in the face of all reports and the critics' reactions, the board maintained its position, supported by Valenti, on the basis that the standards for an R rating had been met. There was no nudity and no overt sexuality. So basically, if you didn't catch all that, people were upset because they believed that The Exorcist received an R rating when it should have received an X rating, and that the R rating had the potential of harming children across the country and just assaulting their senses, and even to the point where Washington, D.C. police threatened to arrest anyone who sold a ticket to a minor to see The Exorcist. So that is the grip that this movie had on people back then, I guess. But the Motion Picture Association of America stood by its R rating decision and did not give Exorcist an X rating, and it was very controversial decision at the time, I guess. Next, we have the Video Recordings Act pulled the first Exorcist movie off the shelves, and this applies to the Video Recordings Act of 1984 in the UK. Basically, for movies released at home video, they had to receive a certificate from the British Board of Film Classification, or the BBFC. And the first Exorcist movie fell victim to this scrutiny because basically they concluded that it wasn't restricted enough for minors to not be able to view the movie for home video. So basically, at the beginning of 1988, the Exorcist movie was pulled off the shelves after 7 years of being freely available at video stores. And for 11 years, people were unable to purchase a home video copy of The Exorcist, and it was only allowed to be occasionally played at theaters in 1991 with a X rating certificate. So yeah, this is kind of like the Prohibition era equivalent of the Exorcist, I guess. However, in 1998, the distributors decided to celebrate the 25th anniversary of The Exorcist and decided to re-release the movie in theaters and also obtain a new certificate for home release. And funny enough, all of the hysteria that surrounded the original 1973 release of the movie wasn't there. people just did not freak out and have the same fear over The Exorcist as they did 25 years prior. Therefore, because of all that, the BBFC concluded that The Exorcist could finally be classified as 18 uncut and be approved for DVD video release with just minor restrictions of underage people being able to view it. So after all that hoopla and years of basically being outlawed for home video release, people in the UK could just freely go and buy or rent The Exorcist for home video viewing. Starting off with Tier 7, we have the banned/unreleased trailer for The Exorcist, and after viewing it, I can kind of see why people in the 70s maybe thought it was too creepy for mass trailer release, so they changed it. However, I did find out something very interesting when I viewed this trailer. So if you guys are familiar with the movie Skinamarink, that indie analog horror inspired slow burn movie that came out last year, for their trailer, there was a snippet, an audio clip they took from this unreleased Exorcist trailer and used it for the Skinamarink trailer. And the audio clip I'm talking about actually got pretty popular on TikTok for a minute, but it's the line, "In this house." But yeah, that line in audio clip is actually originally from the banned Exorcist trailer, so yeah, the more you know. Pretty creepy. Next up, we have Beyond the Door, which is a 1974 Italian horror film that is basically just a ripoff of The Exorcist. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. And interesting fact, Warner Brothers actually sued the creators of this movie and reached a settlement in 1979 for an undisclosed amount of money. But yeah, this is just one of many movies that try to cash in on the Exorcist trend. So this next entry is a little weird because it seems like it's something I would see on Wang's channel. I don't know if you're familiar with his stuff. But basically, the Flesh Farm is like an older website. It's very early 2000s feeling and its design and presentation. But it seems to be like a sort of horror encyclopedia for any and all horror media. And I couldn't find out too much about it. It seems to be still up and running. I don't know when the last time it was updated, but yeah, I don't know why this was on this iceberg, because it kind of relates to The Exorcist just because they made an entry on The Exorcist, but besides that, I don't know how it really relates to the iceberg, to be honest. Next up, we have The Manitou, which is a 1978 supernatural horror movie that was based off the book of the same name, written in 1976. The movie and book is basically kind of like The Exorcist, but Native American themed. Like, instead of a Abrahamic demon doing the possessing, it's a Native American theology and folklore entity that does it. So I haven't watched it myself, but the concept seems pretty interesting, so I kind of like that. Next, we have The Antichrist, also released under the name of The Tempter, is basically another Italian-themed supernatural horror film that is basically a cash-in on The Exorcist. Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty more of cash-in Exorcist movies that this iceberg doesn't even mention, but yeah, this is just another one for the books. Next up, we have Repossessed, which is the 1990 American horror comedy movie that is a parody of the 1973 Exorcist movie, which you probably guessed, and it stars Leslie Nielsen and Linda Blair herself. So I actually watched this movie, and the funniest scene is definitely near the end, where like they have all these different religious figures like come together at the end. It kind of almost like an Avengers superhero team up for the possession. And it also reminded me of like the South Park episode where they had like the Jews, Muslims, and Christians all come together for like a Van Halen show. So I don't know, that was the funniest scene to me, honestly. The next entry is actually something that I already mentioned previously, but the police in Washington, D.C. threatened to arrest anyone who sold a ticket for The Exorcist to anyone who was underage. And yeah, that's just crazy to me. I've already kind of been over it, but this hysteria surrounding The Exorcist is just kind of unreal to me, because even with movies that have been controversial like in our lifetimes, I don't think anything came to that same level, at least not that I can remember. Next entry we have is Abby, which is a 1974 American blaxploitation film, and it's basically just a copy of The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby, which is another horror film. But unlike the other entries I mentioned, this one was actually somewhat of a financial success. But if you're not familiar with what a blaxploitation film is, it's essentially a normal exploitation film focusing on controversial topics, but the focus of the characters are black people instead of the traditional white people being portrayed in exploitation movies. So there you go. There's your film history right there. And last but not least, we have the movie Satan, which is a 1974 Turkish cult horror film that is basically just a complete shot-for-shot remake of The Exorcist. Like, literally, they try to like recreate scenes from The Exorcist for this movie. Film was very low budget. There's not too much else to say about this one, but I thought the last entry would be more of a banger, but still, it it kind of interesting because the poster I thought was kind of, I don't know, it just stood out to me. So there you have it, folks. That is it. That is the entire Exorcist Iceberg chart. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I myself was a big fan of the original Exorcist movie and Exorcist 3, so I was more than happy to pick up another horror franchise and make an iceberg chart out of it for the spooky season. And for all of you watching that made it to the end, thank you as always. You guys are the real troopers and the reason I keep doing this and making videos for you. I'm just your little circus monkey and I'm here to dance for you. All jokes aside though, guys, don't think I haven't noticed the sheer exponential boom in my channel because of my last Island of the Slaughter video I made. That was just insane. I did not expect anyone to really care about Island of the Slaughter. I mean, I know it was popular on TikTok and Tumblr, but I didn't think it would get that much attention here on YouTube. But I'm glad you all enjoyed it, and I hope you guys all support the original creator like I mentioned in that video. And I've tried to respond to all you guys' comments, or at the very least read all of them. I can't read every single one as there's like thousands of them now, I think. But yeah, either way, guys, I'm just so thankful that you guys enjoyed it and continue to watch my channel and help it grow. It really warms my heart. I don't know what else to say. It kind of like every time I open my YouTube channel now, I just like get happy, you know. I'm just like, oh my god, they like me. They really like me. Oh no. And even though I don't make videos as frequently as I would like to, I still try to make content that you and I can both enjoy together, because I mean, you know, what's the fun in making something that we don't mutually enjoy, right? So I try to talk about stuff that interests me as well as interests you. I have a couple more video ideas in the works for you guys, you know, a few irons in the fire. I try to find the time to still work on stuff. My life has gotten a little bit busier recently, so that's kind of why I haven't been as attentive as I was during the summer months. But anyway, enough excuses, right? But to wrap this video up, as always, guys, thank you for watching. And just in case I don't see you, stay safe and have a good one. Goodbye.